Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be sharing some GeoGuessr tips for Eastern Europe. This will range from meta tips to language and landscape tips, and this will be really helpful for country streaks and country battle royale, but it'll also make you more accurate with your guesses in normal games. Starting off with the Baltics, which is one of the harder regions in Eastern Europe, I find the best way to distinguish each country is these blue road markers. This is Estonia, and the road markers face to the side of the road, so you can see them when you're driving up the side, but when you're directly in front, you can't see the number. In Latvia, you're going to have the same road markers, but these ones are going to be parallel to the road, so you can see them when you're right in front of them. And finally, in Lithuania, you're going to have these road markers, which are angled and display two different numbers. Moving on to Russia. Russia's pretty distinct with these signs, as they often have a border around them, and you'll have 3 bars at the bottom. And you'll also sometimes have these black and white striped poles. They're not everywhere in Russia, but if you find these, you know that you are in Russia, as well as these striped bus stops, but these can also be found in Lithuania, I believe. But Russia does use the Cyrillic alphabet, so if you find one of these bus stops with the Cyrillic alphabet, or one of these poles or signs, you're definitely going to be in Russia. Russian license plates are also not blue. They don't have a blue strip on the side like most countries in Europe do. If you have what I already mentioned, the signs, the poles, plus no blue strip on the license plates, it's pretty much always going to be Russia. Moving on to Poland, and Poland is one of the easier countries in Eastern Europe to get. One of the most distinct parts about it is these crossing signs, which have this horizontal line instead of what you'll get in most European countries, which is going to be like the bars that you'll see on the crosswalk. But in Poland, they just have a horizontal line going across. You'll also find these signs in Poland. I don't think these are anywhere else in Europe. They just have this thin red border with this yellow inside. They're pretty distinct. Like, for example, Finland and Sweden also have yellow signs, but the border is not thin. Poland is the only country with this thin border. And finally, in Poland, you're gonna have these poles. Now, these poles, these holy poles, are also found in Hungary and Romania, but they have different features about them that distinguish them. For example, often in Poland, you'll have 2 of these, like in an A-frame. You might find that in like Hungary, but the poles are a bit more distinct in Hungary. Moving on to Czechia. In Czechia, you're gonna have these bollards. They're just like these thin plastic bollards with, on the front, you'll have these orange and black squares, and on the back, you're gonna have these white and black squares. These are distinct to Czechia and Slovakia, but one of the best ways to tell the two apart is going to be the language. For example, in Czechia, I believe that this E here with this accent over top is exclusive to the Czech language. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's definitely going to be some language differences between the two. I don't really know all of them, unfortunately, but yeah, that's going to be your biggest distinguisher, is going to be the language, the different accents over letters. That's going to be really important. In Slovakia, you'll also have the same bollards in Czechia with the white square on the back and the orange squares in the front. Sometimes they can be red, but there's also going to be a lot more like hills in Slovakia, and sometimes you'll have Gen 3 coverage in Slovakia. There's going to be a lot of Gen 4 coverage in both countries, but if you see these bollards with Gen 3 coverage, which is a bit rare now because I believe they updated it, but with Gen 3 coverage in these bollards, it's going to be Slovakia. Moving on to Slovenia. Slovenia is a pretty mountainous country. It kind of looks like Switzerland, but Switzerland obviously has the low cam, which isn't here. And you're also going to have these bollards, which kind of look like the Austrian ones, but if you have like more of these like Slavic characters, Slavic language, and these bollards, then it's definitely going to be Slovenia. It's pretty distinct. Slovenia also has the blue on the license plates, as you can see right here. Slovenia is pretty distinct, just like the mountains, the landscape, bollards, which aren't exclusive to Slovenia, but if you see like, you know, the language, the mountains, with these bollards, it's going to be Slovenia. Moving on to Croatia. Croatia is a pretty easy country. The most distinct part about it is the license plates, which don't feature blue on them. They're going to be all white, as well as there's going to be an antenna on the back, which is pretty important. Like, the antenna can help you find the difference between Croatia and North Macedonia, which North Macedonia also just has white license plates. Speaking of North Macedonia, I just want to show you an example. We have these white license plates, but if we look at the back of the car, there's not going to be an antenna, and it also uses the Cyrillic alphabet, which Croatia uses the Latin alphabet. Moving on to Montenegro. It can kind of be hard to tell the difference between Montenegro and Albania, but both are pretty mountainous countries, and you'll have these rifts in the sky if you look up. It can kind of be hard to tell the difference, but the easiest way, especially if you're in an urban area, this is Albania. You're going to have these rifts like Montenegro, but you're going to have these water tanks on top of a lot of buildings. Like, they're kind of everywhere. If you look back there. Sometimes you'll have these red license plates as well in Albania. And obviously you have these mountains in the back. Moving on to Serbia. Serbia can be a bit of a tricky country, but once you know a couple things, it's not too hard. So first is the Cyrillic alphabet. Serbia uses the Cyrillic alphabet for the most part. And there's also not going to be an antenna on the back, just like North Macedonia. But unlike North Macedonia, there's going to be blue on the license plates. Also, Serbia is pretty flat compared to a lot of the other Balkan countries. Moving on to Hungary. In Hungary, the poles are pretty distinct. You're also going to have like this autumn coverage a lot of the time. Moving on to Bulgaria. Bulgaria uses the Cyrillic alphabet, and it's a pretty mountainous country. Sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between Bulgaria and Greece, but again, the biggest difference is going to be the alphabet, as well as a big distinguisher between Bulgaria and a lot of other Eastern European countries is just like the winter coverage. Next up, we have Romania. A lot of the poles have this painted white bottom, and they're going to be holy poles, just like Poland and Hungary. But yeah, this painted white at the bottom, as well as sometimes the trees near the poles will have this like white paint on them as well. You can see on that tree right there, and they're often a lot skinnier than the other poles. But yeah, this white paint on the bottom, and sometimes you'll have like this yellow marker on them as well. And also, Romania is a Latin language, so if it looks more similar to like Spanish or Italian, but it feels more Eastern European, and it's gonna be Romania. And finally, we have Ukraine. Sometimes Ukraine can be pretty hard to tell apart from Russia, but the biggest differences are gonna be the car, the Google car. In Ukraine, the Google car is red. This is a really good example of it right here, but if we just move forward a bit, you can still see that there's a bit of a red tint. So the Ukraine car is red. But if you can't see the car, then the next thing you want to look for is the license plates. The Ukrainian license plates are pretty distinct, but it can be sometimes hard to see them. But if we look really closely here, we can see a slight blue tint up there and a slight yellow tint down there. And that's because on the Ukrainian license plates, it has like the Ukrainian flag on it, basically, with the bright yellow and bright blue. It can be kind of faint sometimes, so it's not the first thing you should look for, but if you can't see the car color, then the second best thing you're going to want to look for is the license plates. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it was helpful. If I got anything wrong or I missed anything, please comment it down below. I really appreciate that, as well as like the video if you learned something. And stay tuned for the next one, where I'm going to cover the Nordic countries. I'm also going to be leaving this map in the description. There's only 21 locations on it, so you can play through that. It's going to have all the tips I included, so that might help you learn a bit more. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.